So we're roughly halfway through the year at the time of me writing this, and in that time there's been a lot of interesting decisions made on the part of AAA game studios. The last few years or so have been kind of an odd time to enjoy video games. From studios releasing some games that range from literally unplayable to one of the games of all time. It can all be a lot to take in. So to that end, I felt compelled to throw my opinion on the pyre that is the discussion of modern day gaming as a whole. Which I know isn't a new thing. People have been criticizing modern day gaming for a while now. But hearing about all the flops in recent years is both sad and kind of funny, so I wanted to talk about it. So if you feel like listening to someone rant and make fun of video games for an indeterminate amount of time, then strap in while we take a look at the downward spiral that is the sad state of modern gaming. So I think my biggest grievance with the games industry today is the state that games are released in. Oftentimes it seems like companies push out a buggy unfinished product, or ones that have half the content locked behind the Ultimate Deluxe pee-pee poo-poo give us $20 more edition. The biggest reason they're able to do this, in my opinion, is the fact that they can always patch the bugs out later. Oftentimes, games nowadays will have a day one patch that rivals the size of the base game in order to simply play the game. Keep in mind that bugs have existed since the dawn of man when Pong was released in 1000 BC. But I think it's more common now due to companies having the ability to release games in this state and then fix them later. Now, I don't inherently think updates to games are bad. Having the ability to add more later or fix bugs that you didn't catch during development is generally speaking a good thing, but not when used like this. Note that I really only play on PC, so I don't know how the console ports play from my own experience. But this year has had some of the worst PC ports ever to come out. The Last of Us 1 and Star Wars Jedi Survivor sit at mixed reviews on Steam due to the fact that these games were almost unplayable on release. This is in part due to bad optimization, and some would say the other part is de novo. For those of you who don't know, de novo is a software used by many AAA games in order to prevent tampering and piracy. However, many report that de novo negatively impacts the performance of the game and also makes modding more difficult. Some are even locked out of the games that they legally purchased by it. Note that not everyone seems to experience these issues, but since it did happen, some developers seem to be moving away from it. Capcom, for instance, removed it from Resident Evil Village. I know these issues are not the fault of the developers or anything, and blame shouldn't be on them. I've read so many horror stories about how they're crunched for time and the sheer work hours that they put into these games is borderline inhumane. Among other things, the game developer job culture seems to be really poor, and I feel like blame lies with the publisher for setting unrealistic timeframes for these games. At least Nintendo knows not to rush a video game. That leads to the poor quality that we see in some newer titles. Just do what CD Projekt Red did and release a statement saying it's going to get delayed. It's these points that lead me to believe that most companies are not out to make a good product or push the medium of video games in any meaningful way, or even make something that's just fun for people to enjoy. At the end of the day, it's about money, which segues into my next point. What would you pay for a brand new AAA game? $50, $60, $70? For most of my childhood, games were between the $50 and $60 range, and I get it. It's not the early 2000s anymore. Inflation's a thing, and at the end of the day, publishers and developers need to make a profit. But the industry standard is $70 for a new game, with some enhanced editions being as much as $99. Most of the time, these games end up being the same shit that they've released for the past several years, with very minor tweaks to them. Graphics can only get so good on each era of hardware, and believe me, I don't think they're making any strides in gameplay with each new entry of FIFA. On top of this, most games have some sort of predatory monetization scheme behind them. Ways to make the player keep paying money after purchasing the already expensive game. Live service fees, premium battle passes, and Lord knows there's going to be an in-game shop for cosmetics, EXP boosts, and other unlocks day one, which I'll delve into more later. The worst offenders of these are your EAs and Activisions, and don't worry Blizzard, I see you too, but you get your own part of the video. Some older Nintendo games are basically unavailable for purchase nowadays without shelling out for the original console with the game, and that gets stupid expensive. So what do? Emulate it? Absolutely not. Nintendo will absolutely send a SWAT team after you, because emulation in their eyes is basically like walking up and taking a fat diarrhea into Shigeru Miyamoto's cereal. But pay $50 a year for our lazy emulated versions of these games, which in most cases aren't even as good as the open source community emulators. But Nintendo, being the poor multi-billion-dollar company that they are, have to launch a righteous crusade against piracy. Like, even their About page feels pretentious and screams that they hate their fans. With games costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions to make, and the time frame to do so in the 3 to 5 year range, I'm not surprised they took this route. These are massive commitments, and it takes whole teams of talented programmers, artists, writers, actors, and musicians to make these works of art. And obviously, all of these people would like to get paid for their services. AAA studios seem to prioritize photorealistic graphics, and motion captured animations, and even famous voice actors for their games. And all of that's going to run you a pretty penny. These aren't bad things to have, and they can certainly present a level of quality in terms of presentation. However, that's all thrown out the window if the game itself is bad. Many people view AAA games as the top of the top in terms of quality.
Cream, yeah. The cream of the crop.
But as of late, most new releases instead of being the cream of the crop have been cream of diarrhea. Things like The Lord of the Rings Golem and Redfall being the low-hanging fruit that I can easily make fun of. Which is why I'm going to make fun of them in a bit. But we've had many others in the past year. The Saints Row reboot and Forspoken did so poorly that they caused their respective studios to get merged with larger companies.
I just
killed a game studio
with my freaking mind!
Gotham Knights was doo-doo, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet were riddled with bugs upon release, and Dying Light 2 was one of the most unremarkably average games of the decade. It came out, and I never heard anything about it ever again, and that's just to name a few. All of these range from mid to bad, however, some games are just straight up scams, which brings me to Overwatch 2. I told you Blizzard gets its own section. Blizzard has a lot of controversy surrounding it, but today I'm only taking a look at a small portion of them surrounding Overwatch 2. The history of this game is rocky to say the least. Back in 2019 when they announced it, Blizzard marketed it as a true sequel to the first game, rehauling some PvP aspects and adding PvE elements as well as other quality of life changes. Shows how well that went. But we'll get there in a second. It was also stated then that the original game would still be available to play alongside 2. Fast forward a few years. Blizzard announced that Overwatch 2 would in fact be replacing 1, tweaking the gameplay slightly by adjusting tanks and team sizes. And when the game's released, Overwatch 1 will unfortunately be taken offline. But rest assured, the campaign mode was still coming. The campaign mode is no longer coming. So most of the reason Blizzard decided to make this new game is no longer part of the new game. But hey, at least they made the game free to play, right? Well, sort of. Due to what I can only assume to be the loot box controversy, which is a whole nother can of worms, they had to change their monetization plan, opting for a premium battle pass in this case, locking new heroes behind the battle pass and making it very grindy to level up. On top of that, the skins in-game can cost anywhere from $10 to $25. You can earn some things on the free battle pass, but a good portion of the things were locked to the paid one. Stuff like this just screams that they wanted more money and that the first game was dying, so they hit the fans with the old bait and switch, promising a sequel and giving them an in-game store with an Overwatch skin. Which isn't the first time Blizzard has done something smelly like this. They've got a long line of slimy business decisions.
We don't have any plans at the moment to do PC. Do you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have phones, right?
TF2 did this shit almost a decade ago without making a whole new game. Why was any of this necessary? All of these things bring up the question of what exactly is a AAA game? What constitutes that level of quality that we tend to associate the label with? Well, I can certainly tell you it's not whatever this is. I think the failure of these games is a testament to how out of touch the companies are with the general gaming public. Like, who asked for this shit? It wasn't me. I certainly didn't wake up one day and say, man, I wish I had a game where I could play as the little rat dude from Lord of the Rings. All the technical issues with this game aside, it's not something that anyone asked for. In fact, the game looks worse than Shadows of Mordor that came out a few years ago. How did they even manage that? And Redfall, while conceptually cool, was just a really poorly made game. Everything about it strikes me as extremely generic, and that's not even mentioning the many, many bugs. I'm just going to put a few clips here to give you an idea.
Come on! We got this!
Minigames make the length of their campaigns a selling point, or the vastness of their worlds, or the graphical fidelity. Some people think having an amazing story or message is the most important. I personally argue that gameplay is the most important aspect. In truth, I know it's a combination of these things that make for a quality game. But often enough, AAA games take the approach of making these massive open worlds with little to no substance in them, with side quests that aren't engaging, and then slapping a half-baked RPG system on things and calling it good. My go-to example of something like this, while a bit dated now, is Fallout 76. Compared to something like 3 or New Vegas, the game is so shallow and hardly feels like a Fallout game. Sure, the map is expansive and pretty, but it's got the depth of a kiddie pool. It took them several years of updates and patches to finally make it into something that resembles a classic Fallout experience. Look, I know this has been me complaining for the last however long this recording ends up being, but I want to stress that I don't think that it's all bad. Look at Nintendo. They might be a really, really shitty company, but they also maybe made the best game of the whole year. Jury's still out until we see how the new Spider-Man game does. And Capcom's been consistently putting out banger after banger, so I still think there's a few big budget studios that know how to make a game. Look at the slew of recent remakes that we've gotten lately. There's a good reason that these games have been remade and remastered, they're just genuinely good. They lack a lot of things that are holding modern gaming back, in my opinion. They just get back to their roots of crafting a concise game without all the extra bullshit. A less is more kind of idea that makes for a well-crafted world to experience. On top of that, we've got a lot of indie developers and smaller studios still making great games that are clearly labors of love. We got a ton in recent years. Hades, Hollow Knight, Cult of the Lamb, Neon White, all games that while smaller can absolutely go toe-to-toe with the giants. So support your indie developers, I think they have a bright future. So what exactly was the point of all of this complaining? Two things. One is hopefully to entertain you guys, and second is to bring attention to all these things in a somewhat coherent way, summarizing the big points and making some jokes along the way. Personally, I love video games, I always have, and I just want to see the industry do better. So if this reaches some corporate head somewhere, here's some free advice. Put a little more time and care into your products, and stop trying to wring every dollar out of the consumer that you can. Also, listen to your community more. Ultimately, they're the ones buying your product, so they should be the ones that you try and cater to. Which is where the average gamer comes in, that's me and you. Stop pre-ordering video games. If the last few years have shown anything, it's a cautionary tale to wait until the game is out to buy it, no matter how many pre-order bonus scrimblows you get for buying it early. I've done it, you've done it, and I don't think people are going to stop, but maybe if they do it a little less, companies will be more inclined to release a finished product. Complaining about it's another valid tactic. Many companies have faced so much backlash over certain things that it's prompted them to change it. That's basically what I've been doing here. So while some parts of modern gaming are mind-numbingly stupid, I remain hopeful that they'll learn from their mistakes and do better. And to the ones that are still making quality content, I hope you'll continue to make stuff that gets us hyped and that we can look forward to. Hi there. I know this was basically a rant for a prolonged period of time, but I hope it was at least entertaining and maybe prompted some interesting discussions. If you liked it and you want to see more stuff like this, liking the video, subscribing, and maybe sharing it somewhere would help immensely. If you want to leave your thoughts in the comments, I always enjoy reading those and responding when I can, so feel free to do that too. What do you guys think of modern gaming? Do you have a favorite good or bad part that you want to talk about? I've been Captain Meaty, this has been a long-winded rant, and if you watched this far, you've been a beautiful audience. As always, I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you next time.